Welcome to Design30. My name is Jason Bilyeu, and in this podcast, I provide design strategies and tools to improve creativity, innovation, and overall design confidence. Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Design30 Podcast. Today, I thought we would go over another design tool. I feel like it's been quite a while since we've done a design tool. It's been more strategies or just kind of some of my thoughts and philosophies around design. So it felt like a good week to bring a tool back into the podcast. Before we get into that, as always, remember to subscribe to Design30 on YouTube. You can also find me on Instagram. It's at LearnDesign30. And then, as always, there is a Design30 Substack that you can become a free subscriber. Or if you're feeling crazy, you can become a paid subscriber. And that would be a great way to support the podcast. So today, I want to just give a quick overview of what a risk map is. And this is something that I talked about a few episodes ago. I think it was towards the end of an episode. I went through what is a risk map and kind of just a quick overview of how it could be used. But this time I wanted to go a little bit more in depth and maybe just describe a little bit more how it's useful and why it's worth putting in the time to create a risk map. So first, just a quick overview of what is a risk map in general. Well, there's a few different ways you can put these together, but the way that I like to do it is you have first you got to come up with all of your risks for the project. And then once you have those, you want to start rating them. And the first thing you want to rate them on is the probability or the likelihood of them actually happening. What are the chances that this risk is actually going to come to fruition? That is it actually going to impact the project? Is it going to impact your schedule? Is it likely it's going to impact cost? What is the likelihood of it happening? And I would rate this just on a scale from 1 to 10. You can think of this as a probability of there's a 10% chance of it happening or a 100% chance of it happening. And obviously it's somewhere, or 0% chance. That's also an option. It's obviously probably going to be somewhere in between. You're not going to have too many risks. Well, if there's a 100% chance of a risk happening, maybe you need to rethink what you're doing with that. And if there's a 0% chance, well, then that's awesome. You don't even need to add it to your risk map. You don't need to be worried about that because it's not going to happen. So that's what you want. That's the first thing you want to rate your risks on. What's the probability of it happening? And then the second thing is you want to look at the impact of the risk on your project. Or you could even do this maybe even on a specific design that you're working on. There's still going to be risks with certain designs, and you want to know what the impact of that is going to be on your design and on your design project overall. So you want to rate the impact of it. So is it going to impact the schedule? Is it going to impact the cost of the project? And it's probably somewhat obvious, but this is definitely much more of a project management tool. It can also be a product management tool if you're looking at different products that you're thinking about releasing, and you want to see what the risks are for developing each of those products. So there's a few different areas you can use it. And you can even just use it for yourself when you're working on a project. If you're an independent consultant or whatever your job is, like I said, if you're just working on a single design, it might be worth throwing together a risk map just to help organize your thoughts and help you know what to focus on. But yeah, so you want to rate this as far as the impact to your project or to your design, your impact to the company. But what is the impact of this risk for this specific, usually it's a project that you're working on. So again, that could be schedule, that meaning that it could push out your timelines a lot. Maybe there's one risk that if this goes wrong, if there's a high probability of it happening and it does happen, it will double the timeline or double your schedule length. That's something that's obviously a really high impact risk. And then, of course, there's also money. There could be a specific component you're designing that if you get it wrong the first time, it's a really expensive part. So maybe you have to spend another, I don't know, something crazy. Maybe you have to spend another $50,000 to get this part remade. So those are the kind of things that you want to be thinking about as you list out all of the risks for your project and you start rating them on probability versus impact. And then to actually create your risk map, you want to, of course, create your X and Y axes. Basically you want to graph it, plot it out, make it visual some way. And you want to put the probability of the risk occurring on the X axis. And then you want to have the impact of that risk. What's the impact if this actually happens? If this risk comes to fruition, you want to have that on your Y-axis. And then at this point, you just start kind of just plotting them all out. All the different risks that you identified earlier, start plotting them out on this risk map. And pretty soon you can see where most of your risks fall. You can see, well, are most of my risks in the high probability and also high impact zone of this map? Then you're probably, where to focus for sure. And maybe you need to rethink some of those risks or rethink some aspects of your project. 'Cause that's probably, there's just too much risk there with too much high impact problems that could occur. So there's probably some rethinking, maybe some rethinking of your project, what your product might be. Maybe you need to cut some features from your product, different things like that. However, if you have a lot of risks that fall into the low probability and low impact zone, then maybe you feel pretty safe. And you're like, well, okay, like these, some of these are probably going to happen, but even if they do, it's a low impact problem, low impact risk. Let's keep moving forward with this project. And maybe there's not even that much risk management that you have to do. Your average project is probably going to have a fair amount of high impact, high probability risk, maybe some high probability, low impact risk. It's probably going to be pretty spread out. And what this does is it just lets you visually see, okay, these are the risks that we really need to work on mitigating. This is where we need to focus our time and energy. And those are usually the risks that are, like I said, high impact or high probability of happening. So that's where you want to focus your energy as far as mitigating those risks. So coming up with plans of, okay, well, how do we prevent this risk from actually happening? What can we do in the event that it does happen? What's our backup plans? What's our plan B, plan C? And so it sounds pretty simple, but I think it's very valuable to put these things actually on paper, or you could build this up in PowerPoint, whatever. You can use Excel and actually plot it out and then print this out. And so it's something that you can visually see. And I think it just adds a lot of clarity to a project. And it's good to have your risks just out there and obvious to the whole team. Because there could be throughout the project times when a team member, if those risks are at the front of their mind, they might find a time or see a moment when they can actually help mitigate that risk or potentially remove a risk entirely. And if it's not in front of them, if they're not seeing this as a high probability risk, those moments can pass by. Maybe you miss opportunities to help reduce those risks. So I think there's huge value in putting it just actually in paper, a visual representation of your risks so that your team can see it and that it's clear. These are the risks that we've identified, and this is what we're working to mitigate. These are the ones that we're really not that worried about, so let's not put a lot of time and effort into mitigating those risks. Let's focus on our high probability, high impact risks. And it's right there on your risk map. And one other advantage of doing one of these risk maps and having it out there, open and obvious, is it's really easy to perhaps get overwhelmed by the amount of risks in a project, especially early on. There's so many unknowns. It can be pretty overwhelming to a team. So if you actually have it listed out and visually represented, you can see, oh, actually, we don't have that many high risks. I don't think we actually need to be stressing out too much about this or freaking out too much about this. It can actually help provide a lot of confidence to your team. And there's enough unknowns in a project, so if you can get your risks somewhat identified, then you're going to be in a lot better place and just create a lot more confidence in yourself, in your project manager, in your team. As when those risks are out in front of you and you feel like you can control them, it does a lot for just adding confidence to your team. And that's about all I have for risk maps. I'd love to hear what other people think. What are your tools for mitigating risk? What are your tools for identifying risks? And how do you visually represent those? How do you go about that? So if you've got thoughts on that, please send them my way. If you decide to use this strategy, I'd also love to see how you create your map. Are you using PowerPoint, Excel? Just interested to see if this is a helpful tool. So please reach out with any comments or questions. As always, you can reach me at LearnDesign30. That's LearnDesign30@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram, as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. That's LearnDesign30. And then how else can you reach me? Oh, also Twitter. You can just reach out on Twitter if that's something you are into. And I think that's it. So please don't hesitate to reach out. As a lot of you who are frequent listeners know, I've been doing some of these fake FAQ episodes or fake facts. I would also love to do some real facts. So if you have questions, please send them my way. Don't hesitate. Those are always fun to answer. And with that, I'm going to leave it there. Have a great Monday, everybody, or whatever day of the week you're listening to this episode on. And remember, design more, despair less. Thanks for listening.